Okay, so today what we're going to look at is geometric mean, which is, as you'll see, is a form of proportions, which is something that we have spent a good bit of time on as of late. And dealing with geometric mean, there's two different types or two different techniques that we can use to solve our problems with or find our variable. And to know which one goes with which, it all depends on this word right here, the altitude. So if you don't know what an altitude is, if we look at our first triangle right here, number 1, as it explains one of our methods here. But it's important to know what our altitude is, which in this case is right there, it's highlighted. The altitude is the length of, or the height of the triangle. So from the very apex of it all the way down to the bottom. It's a straight line, and as you can see, it forms two different triangles here. So it's important to see that Cn is the altitude. So in these problems, if we are given the altitude, like right here in number 2 and number 3, or if we're solving for the altitude like we are here in number 4, we are going to use this method, which is called the heartbeat. Another word I used to call this is a roller coaster, because the way we go about it kind of looks like a roller coaster. But to show you what this method looks like, when we look at number 1, you can kind of see it right here in blue, but what happens is we're going to start right here with A and go to N, so that side right there, AN, we hit that first, and then like a roller coaster or like a heartbeat, like a monitor, it goes up. So when we go up from N to C, that's going to represent our altitude, but we're going to go up. So we're going to put those two sides over each other like a proportion. Once we reach the top, we come back down like you would on a roller coaster, so that's going to be CN, and then we're going to finish out through the rest of the way, which is going to be NB. So this right here is going to represent our proportion that we're going to use and solve for our missing side. One thing that's important to see is that this right here, NC and CN, those are the same. So that's always going to be the same number or a variable like you would see here in number 4. But this is the method or the way that we're going to go about solving these problems. And to show you what one looks like, let's look at number 2. Again, I'm going to start right here. It doesn't really matter, but it always makes sense to go from left to right. But starting here, if I go this way to the altitude, the first thing I hit right here is X. So just like I did right here with AN, I'm going right here. Then from there, I'm going to go up my roller coaster. So when I do that, the first place I hit, or the first number I hit, I should say, is the altitude, which is going to be 2. So I'm going to write X over 2. That represents that, just like I did right here. Then I'm going to come back down, and when I come down like this, I still hit that 2 again. And then when I finish out the rest of this triangle, I hit that number 4, so like it did come up and come down. So that's really a difficult part of this, is getting it set up into a proportion. Once I do that, I cross multiply and divide. So when I do that, I'm going to get 4x, and then that's going to equal 4. Of course, divide by 4, so I'm going to get x equals 1. So 1 is going to be my final answer here. So I want you to try to solve 3 and 4. So pause the video now, I'll let you work it out, and then I'll have those worked and talk about those. So go ahead and work those 2 problems now. Alright, so here is 3 and 4. So number 3 is a lot like number 2, where I have my x right there. So I go and I'm going to use our roller coaster method, where the first thing I go is hit that X, which I see here, go up with the 4, come back down, there's the 4 again, and then come across the 3, and then from there cross multiply. You will get a lot of decimals with these, so don't be afraid or think you did something wrong if you got a decimal, as we got 5.3 repeating. 4 is an interesting one, and you'll see problems like 4 as well. So when you go and set this up, there's your first part, which is that 4, then you go up to the X, and then we come back down and see that X again, and then we go to our 10, which we see there. Now what happens here when we cross multiply, I'm going to get x times x, which is x squared. Not 2x, x squared. And then I have 4 times 10, which you should know is 40. So when I get to that x squared, if you remember, like when we do Pythagorean theorem, we do this all the time, where if we have x squared, to get rid of it, we got to square root both sides. So you're going to take the square root, so square root of 40 is going to give you this 6.23. So if you got 20, then you probably did 2x, but we need to keep in mind we're going to do x squared. So this is going to be our heartbeat, or I'll write it up here, the roller coaster method. Either way works. This one's definitely the easier one of the 2, so these problems shouldn't have any issue with. But this is when we have an altitude that we're looking for, or an altitude that is given to us, we use this method. And we're about to go and look at the second method when we don't have an altitude given to us. Alright, so let's take a look at our second method. And like I said, when I talk about the first is when we are looking at the altitude, which of course represents this line right here, CN. If you notice with these 5 problems here, there's not an altitude that we're looking for or that is given to us. So when that's the case, we have a different method. So we call this the rabbit. Another word that I use to call this with is boomerang. So if you know boomerang, you throw it and it comes back to you. So that's kind of what happens here with this method. This one is a little more complicated. So just keep that in mind. It isn't as easy. But if I'm going to start, I'm going to start right here with A. It doesn't matter which one we start with, A or B. I'll kind of talk about actually which way to start. But if I go right here from A, I'm going to swing around. So like I'm releasing the boomerang. So I'm going to get the entire bottom side of this triangle, which is going to be A, B. Once I get to that place right here in B, I'm going to come up here to C, so I'm going to get BC. Once I reach the top, this is when the boomerang is coming back around, so then I'm going to get back down here to CB. So once I'm here, I'm not going to go back the entire way. I didn't throw the boomerang hard enough. I get stopped right here at BN. So this is, it's a little more complicated, a little over the place. Here's what's called the rabbit. As you can kind of see, get a little bunny ears made, but you don't go all the way. It doesn't come all the way back to A. It stops right here at that altitude. But this right here is going to be our setup or our proportion to solve when an altitude isn't given to us. I'm going to make a side note of that. Actually put it right here. So we use boomerang, or if you want to call it rabbit, in parentheses rabbit, when there no altitude in these problems. So make sure we keep that in mind. So that's how we know which to use in our situations here. Another thing to see is just like that previous one, we see that those two are going to be the same. So that should be the same number or variable depending on what we have. So let's set up a problem right here. So let's look at number 2. Let me go with a different color here, kind of distinguish it. So in number 2, now if you notice, the 14 is over here. So you're going to start basically opposite of this number. So I want to start right here. It wouldn't make sense if I start here and go this way and do all of that when there's nothing here. So I want to make sure that when I do this, I hit what I'm looking for or the variable that I'm looking for. So I'm going to start over here. I'm going to go all the way across. Something to see is that even though I have X right here, I'm going to go different color so we can see this. X represents this little piece right here, not the entire length, just that little piece. So 16 represents this entire bottom side. Then once I get up here, I'm going to hit my 14 on top, come back down, hit that 14 again. So there's my 2 numbers that I see there. And like I said, I don't go all the way, only hit this little piece, which is going to be X. So it does come across where it looks like a little bit more random. This one takes a little bit more practice compared to the other. Let's start here, come around up to my 14, come back down, and then get right here to my X. So once you can get it set up, it's easy to solve. You just have to cross multiply just like in our case before. So getting it set up is really the most difficult part. You're going to get 16x equals 196. You divide by 16, so x is going to equal 12.25. So 196 divided by 16 will get you that. So that's what x is going to equal in that problem there. So same thing like the one before. I want you to work these 3 problems down here. I'll have these already worked out. So pause, work those 3 problems down there, try those out. One thing to keep in mind is that this 8 right here on number 4 goes all the way across. So 8 represents the entire length right here to use that little piece there. So go and solve these problems. I'll have them worked out. So pause this video, and then when you unpause it, you'll see these worked out and you can check your work. Alright, so here is those bottom 3 problems. So let's start with number 3. So looking at number 3, kind of like I was saying with number 2, where that 14 is you're going to have to read where to start with. So that because that 27 is here, you want to start here. Go down, you're going to get y that represents this entire length. hit that 27 twice here and here, and then you come back to that 16. So from here, you're going to cross multiply and divide. So when you do that, you're going to get, like I said, a decimal. That's what you get, honestly, a majority of the time. So that's going to give you 45.56. Looking at number 4, this, like I said, this entire bottom length right here is 8. Come up to the 2, come back, or I'm sorry, with the y, come back into the y, so you get the y's here and here, and then you finish off with the 2. So here's an example of when you do this, you're going to get, or a situation in this new method, where you'll get that y squared, or your variable squared. So again, you got to take the square root of that, so when you get to take square root of 16, you of course get 4. 5 is a challenge problem on this one. So it's important to see what the length of this bottom is. So I have y right here, and I have 5 here. So a lot of mistakes that we make on this is thinking that we have to multiply those together. But think about if I had a number here for y. So let's imagine this number here was like 3. You would have 5 plus 3 and say this entire length here was 8. So that same mindset of whatever that is you would add to it, that's where this expression comes from. It's going to be 5 plus y, not 5y. So I get 5 plus y, there's the 6, and then I come down and get my 5 right there when I get towards that altitude. So I'm going to cross multiply and divide. When I cross multiply, I'm going to have 5 times this expression, so I have to distribute this 5 out, and then of course 6 times 6 is 36. So from here, it's just an algebra problem that we should be able to work. I'll work it down. I'm going to get 5y equals 11, or y equals, this is a point right there, so 2.2. So these are the 2 different methods that we take to figure out our problems here with geometric mean. Like I said, you're either going to use the boomerang, which is what we just did, or you're going to use our roller coaster. Roller coaster is when the altitude is given to us. Boomerang, like I said, right here is when there is no altitude given to us. So that's when we know to use each one. But these are 2 methods. There's another practice page that you can work to get some more practice on it, and that'll be it.